Hello and welcome. My name is Rohit. Sawhney. I'm a group product manager on the cloud security team, and I'm honored for you to join us here today. Today we'll talk about how diversity changes business at Cisco. Here's what we're going to discuss. In a very short minute here, I will introduce our panel who has joined us for this discussion. The backdrop for our conversation today is a product that is built in the cloud security team called App Discovery. I'll briefly explain that. And then we'll go into a panel discussion, which is where we'll spend the majority of our time, then wrap up. As I said, I'm honored to have our panelists here today who've traveled from near and far to be here. I'm very grateful for their time and their opportunity. So what I'd love to do is, starting with my right here, I'd love for you guys to tell us a little bit about yourself in terms of your name, your role, where you're located, and what defines you.
Sure. My name is Joseph Barnett. I'm one of the cloud security architects. I work on the umbrella teams. I've worked with the cloud security Casspi products as well, and App Discovery, obviously. I'm located in Eastern Washington State, so I work remote. What defines me? I would say my teams, my relationships with my friends, who I like to call friends within the company. I think that defines me. Those are the people that I do my best work for every day and who I think about when I make decisions.
That's great.
Hi, I'm Olivia Priya. I'm a software engineer in Cisco's Cloud Security Business Group. I work in the Cloud Delivered Firewall team. Prior to this, I was working with the App Discovery team. I'm located in San Jose, California. And what defines me? I was born and raised in India. I moved to US about 15 years ago looking for better opportunities. So I'm defined by the Eastern culture and influences.
Wonderful.
Hi, my name is Eren Casspi. I'm an architect on the cloud security product management team. And I have lived on 3 continents. So born in South Africa, lived most of my life in Israel, and then lived for a good 6 years in the States. So I like to think that I have a bit to contribute to diversity as I've experienced it.
Wonderful, Eren. Thank you.
And my name is Claudia Love. I lead our user experience team at Cloud Security. And what defines me is that I am a somewhat recent immigrant. I came to the US about 6 years ago, born and raised in Uruguay, but also the product of a multinational, multicultural home. And I'm based in San Francisco.
Wonderful. Thank you, panelists, once again for joining us. So one of the things that our panelists have in common is that they were all, in one way or another, involved in this product called App Discovery. And I'd like to spend just a few minutes giving you some context around this product, and then we'll go into our panel discussion. So this product called App Discovery is essentially a shadow IT product. For those who are not familiar, shadow IT is the discovery of applications that are not under the control or visibility of an IT organization. So for example, you work in an organization and you use Box and O365 as applications. There may be more usage in your corporate headquarters from the standpoint of Dropbox and Netflix and Google applications. Those may be applications your IT department is not familiar with. As you can see on the dashboard here, we help visualize that. It's in the context of the Cisco Umbrella Cloud Security Suite, and there is not only discovery of those applications, but also risk associated with them and workflow management. Any IT administrator can go through this product and be able to then see the risk, the identities, the requests, and total traffic going to these applications that helps them to ultimately block or allow those applications in their environment. Why do we talk about this? Is because this product was actually made up of several different teams. We had over 30 team members across several cities and countries that enrolled in the creation of this product, and we thought it developed a nice story, which is why we have our panels here today. The result of it was pretty impactful. We have launched this product as of October of 2018, and you can see there's over 20,000 enterprise customers that are using this. This is for the Cisco Umbrella product, where we effectively have those number of customers. So there's been a huge adoption in not only that, but active users and the discovery and control of all of these applications. So let's go ahead and start our discussion with this in mind. And I'd like to kick it off, Joseph, with yourself, if you don't mind, which is one of the hardest things that we know about building products is understanding the what and the why. What are we doing? Why is it important? Given that many of you didn't know each other prior to this product, can you start us off by telling us how you came together?
Sure. So, so when we got started with this product effort, I had just been hired into Cisco. I had been hired into the CloudLock Casspi team, and I wasn't familiar with any of the members that were part of this team. I was asked to design the system to start from scratch. Imagine a greenfield project where you start with nothing, shared nothing. We didn't want any dependencies on old technology. We wanted to make everything brand new, and we wanted to set this up so that it could succeed as we integrated with other Cisco products. One of the challenges there is when they asked me to do this, they said, we're going to go next week and we're going to do a kickoff. That meant I had zero time to think about the problem, which presents its own kinds of challenges. And when you think about a greenfield project, we had to actually design not just the product and what it would do, but the infrastructure, how we would manage that infrastructure, how we would build and deploy, everything you can imagine, and it's quite a daunting task. And so I put together some decks, but when we showed up at this kickoff, I very quickly went through these and I said, I think it's going to take this much time, which obviously everybody wants everything right now. But as a team, we ended up spending a lot of times in different breakout sessions and going over those designs and refining those as a team and approaching it in an MVP approach where we acted as if we're a brand new startup. We understand we have tight and short deadlines, but on each layer of that architecture, we iterated together and we negotiated until we found success.
Wonderful.
And I think that spending time with each other really made a huge difference.
Interesting. Now, where was that kickoff, and how many team members did that include? Do you recall?
Oh, this was in Tel Aviv, and I'd never been overseas, or at least not that far overseas before. Okay. And I want to say there was probably at least all 30 people who were part of this, and we went through team by team and gave presentations, talked about how we understood the problem and what we thought we needed to do.
Okay. Any thoughts of any other team members who were there at that kickoff? Any remembrance?
Yeah, so one good thing about these teams were, they were different teams, they all had their own working styles, but we all got together for 1 week and we got to know each other. And when we went back, we were able to work with each other in a very productive way. I think that's one of the key factors here, because we all are good in what we do, but the most important thing is for us to work together in the best possible way.
Was there anything significant that happened during the week to help you bridge those working styles?
Yeah, actually, so one of the interesting things that happened for me is, being in Eastern Washington and trying to bridge the divide, the global divide of working with those teams, my boss agreed to let me relocate over there for 2 weeks, so I stayed with the team for 2 weeks, which was really cool. I got to meet everyone, and one of the things that I found about at least the teams in Israel is they really cared about making me feel welcome. And so we spent every day and basically every night together where people would go through and they'd cycle through and take turns taking me out and entertaining me, and I became very fast friends with most everyone on the team. And we did some really great things, like we went paddleboarding in the afternoons, and we always made sure we ate lunch together. And so I think that was significant. Other challenges that we had, it was such tight deadlines and we were moving so fast that we would constantly negotiate what we could achieve in this next sprint, et cetera. And one of the things that really stood out was we would do things, and I think you'll talk about this a little later, is we did these things called accelerators, accelerator workshops. And when we negotiated some of the more challenging pieces of the architecture, I would actually go out and have coffee. Nice. And I would have coffee with Itai, the leader at the time, and we would negotiate when things could be done and find out how do we manage that cadence. Mm-hmm. And I remember directly sitting with you and Itai multiple times, almost every week I believe, and we would negotiate what was the cadence for the next sprint, what pieces were more important, mm-hmm. and we would take that time and plan this out so it felt like a very smooth process, even though we know that we were all learning during that phase. And
Yes.
so it was a real challenge, and I think
Wonderful.
that made a difference.
Yeah, the power of that human connection and conversation is so great. So what we thought we'd also do is for our audience, since we are talking about diversity and you might have heard about D&I or DEI, let's go ahead and define that. And so we're taking the opportunity to do that here. Diversity is effectively the fact that everyone is individual and different. So that's inclusive of gender, age, race, ethnicity, orientation, all the things that you see here. Something that we're very mindful of. Now, one thing I didn't mention as we began this panel is none of us are experts in this space. We just recognize the fact that we all came from different backgrounds together to build this product, and we thought it's a story that is worth sharing. Another thing we often hear about is something called equity. And equity is equal access to opportunities. Now, this visual that I'm going to share with you really helps bring this home, I believe. There's a difference between equality and equity. Equality is effectively everyone has equal access, one-size-fits-all solution, as you can see here. You have a single platform that everyone can stand on, but as you can see in the visual, not everyone can reach that goal, in this case, the Apple. That's not the same as equity, where everyone needs slightly different things to get equal access. In this case, some have gotten additional means to be able to reach that Apple you can see on the right-hand side. I was thinking of an example of this just earlier today in our cloud security team, and you guys can probably empathize with this, which is we have town hall meetings. And the town hall meetings typically take place facilitated by our general manager on Thursdays, California time, so in the West Coast, but we have global teams, and global teams are really in India and Tel Aviv, as we touched on in the UK. They cannot access that information at the same time. So we have regional town hall meetings, and we have leaders who help bridge that gap. That helps to form equity in this case, because now all the employees have equal access to that information. So hopefully that story helps a little bit. And then finally, I want to touch on inclusion. Inclusion is a sense of belonging. I feel we do this pretty well in our cloud security team, where we talk a lot about inclusive culture, where people feel welcomed, valued, respected, accepted, and heard so they can do their best work. So with that, Pallavi, I have a question for you. As we were embarking on this project, I believe we had an opportunity to bring together these different working styles like we were talking about. Can you describe a little bit about like the first few weeks or months together, building on what Joseph said, where you might have felt a bit more inclusive or integrated into this team? Were there any occurrences or stories that you can share?
Yeah, so I think it started about 3 years ago when CloudLock was integrated with Umbrella and Cisco. There were 3 different companies, and we were all trying to come together and build a common product. I felt very welcomed, and there was, of course, a sense of belonging. We were invited to Waltham, the CloudLock headquarters, and we had very useful and good meetings with the co-founders of CloudLock, also the other stakeholders. We spent a week doing brainstorming on how to build a roadmap for the product. We discussed how all of us could help each other. So that gave a very good feeling of belonging. And then we had a workshop in Tel Aviv that Joseph talked about earlier, which was very useful.
Yes.
We made friends with the team, and then after that, no co-location was not a deal at all. So we were very comfortable working with each other over WebEx Teams or just having a phone conversation and trying to solve problems. And talking more about inclusion, I think it's in the DNA of Cisco. Every floor in Cisco buildings has its own culture, and every acquisition maintains their own culture. So we all work in different styles, but at the end of the day, we are able to work together very well.
Yes. Yeah, so you touched on a few different things there. You talked about CloudLock. For those who don't know, that was an acquisition Cisco made in August of 2016. Prior to that, there was OpenDNS, which is rebranded as Cisco Umbrella. That was acquired in the summer of 2015 for our audience. And so you had all these teams coming together, so you had this extra complexity. Yaron, I want to touch with you on this. You were there through a lot of this journey, and you had these new teams coming together, but also integrating themselves within a greater Cisco. Did the team feel any extra pressure, or were there things that you noticed that were just kind of unique to the startup culture merging into a larger environment?
So I think more than anything else, what describes these two products and the cultures that stand behind them, that have built these products, is, like you mentioned, that startup type of culture, which kind of gives the teams a huge advantage, right? When you're faced with something new, you have two types of reactions. One is to be either defensive about that, and the other one is to see the opportunities that are involved. And given that these teams are kind of young teams, they came with a lot of drive. It was almost more like they were thinking, oh, here's a great new toy. Here's a great thing that kind of complements what we have or fills a gap that we have and gives us the ability to go to market with a much stronger element or a stronger value. I think that's definitely on the business side, and on the technical side, on the engineering side, again, it's more like, hey, here's a new toy, let's play with it.
Mm-hmm. Claudia, did you feel any of that as well as you were integrating with the team and working with all these entities, maybe in different parts of the world you hadn't?
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, as a manager, it wasn't so much about a given project. It was more around the organization of the design team.
Yes.
CloudLook had designers, Umbrella had designers. These two groups coming together introduced a whole lot of challenges, from adding new time zones to the different teams using different tools and having to align on those aspects, new cultures that people hadn't worked with before. But echoing what my coworkers were saying here, I think you can either get frustrated and defensive about situations like that, or you can have a more open approach and just think about the overall good. And if a group has a better approach to doing something, embrace that for the whole group. Instead of kind of like pushing back against it. And I saw a lot of that in these two groups coming together. There was a lot of openness and a lot of like thinking about the opportunities as these presented in order to overcome those challenges.
Yeah, I recall also having been part of this project that it was very design and prototype focused. You're doing a lot of build, measure, learn, for those in our audience who are familiar with that engineering culture. And you had folks like Uri in Tel Aviv that were leading the charge there, and there were a lot of incarnations of this project. Did you feel for your UX team that there was learning that came from that? Like they had a different way of going about solving a problem than perhaps the traditional teams?
Yeah, and I think everyone respected that there was a design team that had been working on this for a while, and for us it was more around like, okay, how do we bring this into Umbrella in a way that is as consistent as possible for the Umbrella customers. I think that's where everyone was thinking about, how do we align these things visually, how do we make it seamless going from one part to the product as we bring this new feature in.
Yeah, wonderful. Mm-hmm. I want to take it back just briefly to something, Joseph, you'd mentioned, but your own, from your perspective in that part of the world, which is these accelerators, right? A lot of the effort was driven, as we acknowledged earlier, in the kickoff from Tel Aviv in engineering, and they had this unique style of how to actually solve problems and get things done and bring people together called workshops. Can you touch a little bit upon what that was like and how that maybe is seated itself in the organization?
Yeah, sure. So there is within Israeli culture this kind of tendency, which can be a bit abrupt for some, but involves getting down to business. Not skirting around issues. Sorry,
no
not
problem.
skirting around issues, but actually getting down to work. So in general, I see meetings as having two different types of meetings. There are meetings where you talk about something, and there are meetings where they're more like working sessions. These workshops were working sessions. They almost became like, mega hackathons, right? So there were deliverables within the actual workshop itself, not just, at the end or maybe a few months down the line. People got a chance to actually work together. And one of the really cool things about that is you were mentioning, equity and equality beforehand.
Yes.
One of the great elements that I guess promote to me, equity is the fact that you have technology. So you're not just walking into a room with people that are different and have no common basis. Their common basis is the technology. They all have their expertise. They're all coming together to work on something.
Yes.
Take that and kind of add a very deliverable-oriented type of event, and you actually get things coming out of there. It's not like you're only planning something, you're also actually building it while it's happening.
I see. So at the end of that given period, you had something to show for it. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. We already had something not only to show, to demo, but we had the basis. So it wasn't like we were thinking only about the ability to kind of prove a point, but also about how that can then be used as a foundation.
Right. Joseph, you hinted at this a little bit earlier. How do you feel that that has persisted, if at all, in the organization?
So, to be completely honest, working with that team, embracing that culture, fundamentally changed the way I work every day.
And how long have you been working?
I've been in engineering for 20 years.
Okay.
And I've been at Cisco for about 3. And when we do these accelerators, one of the things that I saw was each one of us brought a special talent, a special skill. The equalizer was absolutely technology. I wouldn't say it was always that way for everyone. One of the larger challenges that I saw was I would introduce new technologies or new approaches that scared a lot of people. But because we spent time together, I went out of my way to spend time with these folks. We trusted each other, and I would take them on a journey of learning brand new technologies, brand new approaches, and they would go with me in that journey, and we would accelerate that. We would accelerate that in exceedingly short periods of time, and within a small amount of time, they would actually develop what I thought was groundbreaking technology, and they would do that in a way that just kind of blew my mind. And so this is something I've repeated over and over and over again since I've been here.
Can I ask you something? You mentioned trust, and they trusted you.
Yes.
Can you comment on how that came about?
I mean, I think it was when I looked closer at what drives them. I spent time to talk to these folks, talk to them and become friends.
Yes.
And talk to them about personal things, their personal ambitions.
Yes.
What did they want to do? And we would work as a team to actually drive toward that. At the same time, I would provide anything that I could to assist in their efforts, and they would do the same for me.
Yeah.
So we became a team.
Okay.
A true team.
Wonderful. Olivia, I was thinking of a conversation we had before around the integration, and Yaron was touching on the Israeli culture and maybe just their nature. I know you were also learning of that as you integrated with the team. Can you comment on that?
Yeah. So first of all, it was very nice of the HR and CloudLock to expose us to the Israeli culture, and they told us that they're very straightforward. So don't take things the other way. That's just how the culture is. And
Yes.
I found it very useful because the team was very good at giving feedback, early feedback, very good reviews, which helped us a lot. And going back to the workshops, I attended a couple of those, and I found them very useful. It was like a one-day sprint for 5 days, and at the end of the week, we were able to accomplish something very substantial. And we got early feedback, and that was a very good kickstart for the app discovery product.
Yeah. And now, I believe these workshops are not just limited to engineering or architecture. I think, Claudia, would you agree that this has also seeded itself in other parts of the organization?
No, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, and design we see it all the time.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to switch over a little bit and talk about something else, which is this concept of unconscious or implicit bias. So by definition, these are learned stereotypes that are automatic, maybe unintentional, deeply ingrained in us and universal, but they influence our behavior. I was thinking of an example of this, and I came across something that one of my colleagues cited, where they said they entered a meeting and they were dressed in a particular way. They happen to have a suit because they just came from a conference, and they're going blindly into this meeting, and a bunch of people that don't know this individual. And they naturally assumed that he, in this case, was the boss. Turns out the boss came a few minutes later, very casual looking, but by then they had shared a bunch of information with him that he didn't necessarily need to know, but they just made this assumption. So Claudia, a question for you. As a hiring manager and someone who's focused on ensuring that we have diverse teams, how does one actually recognize and maybe check or overcome these biases?
Yeah, I think it starts at the hiring process. I think it's important to have diverse interview panels. If I'm a woman and I'm interviewing at a company and everyone in the panel is a man, I may not think that there's a place for me in that organization or that my voice might not be heard. So I think that's the very beginning. And then I think it's important to keep it in check in day-to-day interactions. I can think of meetings at being kind of like a place where some of those things come to light, right? So when you have a meeting where some people might be culturally wired to be more on the quiet side and not really speak up, some people on the contrary are very loud and they sort of like take over the meeting. So I think it's important. It comes down to self-awareness, and it comes down to having present that those biases exist so that we can spot them when it happens, whether it's on our own behavior or in others. And bringing it up and having constructive ways of addressing it.
Yeah. For the rest of the panel members, is there anything you find that we can do to help support that a little bit better?
I would say just lean in.
What do you mean by that?
Give people the opportunity to talk. Ask them what they think. Ask open-ended questions, and truly listen to what they're saying. Try to recognize your own biases or your own failures when you look at somebody. You might have different opinions, just on that very first impression, like you were talking about. And if you recognize that in yourself and you lean in, sometimes you're very much surprised on what you find out about the other person.
Yeah, it's amazing what you can learn if you just listen and hear others. Any thoughts, Olivia, or your own from you on what you can do to support that environment?
So resonating with what Claudia said, we have a culture in our team that we give everyone a chance to speak. Like people from different cultures have different working styles. So some people don't like to talk. So we make sure that everyone gets a chance to speak. So it's in one way, if you have equality, then it solves a lot of problems. Yaron, would you like to add something?
Yeah, so a lot of this has to do kind of like also with the leaders that are in the group, because like you've all mentioned, there are quieter people and there are people that kind of are more expressive. And leader, like, a good quarterback kind of also makes sure that the ball gets to the different players in the team, kind of gets that ability to express themselves, and sometimes even bring them in to discussions in smaller forums. But at the end of the day, I mean, our main strength is the people that are in that room or in that team or in that effort. Having the ability to give them their voice is pretty much one of the main goals I see on the leader's part.
Yeah, wonderful. So, as we talk about this subject, I also figure that you guys have some insights or stories that you wanted to share. So, in no particular order, I want to go around the table and open it up to you. We have a lot of leaders who are listening to this and thinking about this concept, and it's not always easy. But we want to surface the fact that diverse people coming together with different opinions, different backgrounds can do amazing things. So as you have the audience listening to this, is there anything you want people to take away from the discussion that we haven't touched on already? Claudia, I'll begin with you.
Yeah, I think it's important to keep an open mind and to give people the benefit of the doubt. Assume good intentions. When different cultures come together, different backgrounds come together, someone might say something that rubs people the wrong way. Like, this is natural, it's going to happen. And I think as long as there's that trust foundation that we talked about, and assuming good intent, the team should be able to work through those things constructively and get the most benefits out of this diverse way of thinking.
Yeah, nicely put. Your own?
Yeah, so more than anything else, there's a reason if you're on a team that you've joined that team, be yourself more than anything else. If you're quiet, tap into your quiet element. If you're expressive, be expressive, but don't try to be something that you're not, and try to bring across, I think, your personal voice and your personal capabilities, because again, there's a reason they wanted you on that team in the first place. So just be yourself.
Very good. Olivia?
So I think engineering teams should not shy away from hiring people with diverse backgrounds. For example, our team in San Jose, the research team especially, had a person who was a bank manager in his past life. Then we had a chemistry major, we had a math PhD. So these diverse backgrounds brought different ideas to the table, and it worked together very well. So I think leaders should not shy away from hiring people with non-computer science background for coding-related roles.
Wonderful. Joseph?
I would like to actually support that thought. I mean, a story comes to mind. I think about somebody who kind of really impressed a lot upon me that I had an opportunity to work with. It's very easy for you to meet somebody and you look at their credentials or you look at their background and you say, okay, this person isn't the right fit, and you immediately shove them off. This particular individual was a film student. If you think about high tech, film and high tech, those two don't necessarily mix, and I don't know, most people would overlook this individual when they were thinking about hiring for a technical position.
Yes.
I remember having discussions with this guy, and he was exceedingly intelligent. He was self-taught in programming. He could absolutely do the work. And he used to have really insightful things that he didn't really understand he was saying. For example, I'd say, hey, this is a design that I think we need to meet, and here's why. And he would look at it and he'd say, that's great, but I have to operate that. How do I look at that and say that's making my job easier? If you're going to add more work, please make sure you're moving something. And that was an important statement. Later I spent time with customers, and I started listening more carefully, and I heard the exact same things. Not to point fingers at myself, that's not really what this was about. It was about the opportunity to listen to somebody who had brilliance in just what they were saying, even though they didn't know they were saying it. And the fact that he was with us, he was part of our team, made a huge difference in the way I started looking at other problem sets. And I think this is something that's transcended everything I've done from that day forward on every design. And when the teams work with me, I look to see, how do we make the most successful product? How do we hit the target and still achieve objectives where people feel strong about what they've put out there?
Yeah. It reminds me of the scientist Bill Nye and his quote, everyone you meet knows something you don't.
That's right.
And so it sounds like you've cited a few examples here today where it's really changed your career and the way that you actually think about things, even in an advanced stage in your career.
That's right.
So with that, I wanted to wrap up our session here. And if you are a Cisco employee, there are a lot of resources available to you. You have the Office of Inclusion and Collaboration, where you have diverse talent accelerators and the multiplier effect, which is an initiative that was started by a Cisco executive. I encourage you to continue the conversation with any of us, our Twitter handle, social feeds. You're welcome to do that or in the comments for this recording. And hopefully, if you took something away from this session, you find an opportunity to pay it forward. Be mindful of those that are with you, that have a voice and that do not. Recognize inequality if it seems off, that people are not contributing to the conversation and you feel that they have something too, or they have a different opinion, but that's one that is well served to share with others. Please help to encourage that and bring that forward. And be open, as we talked about, in learning from others. So with that, a quote I love to cite is, strengths lie in differences, not in similarities, from Stephen Covey. There is really an opportunity in what we're talking about here. It's not always the easiest path, I will say, but I encourage you to put in the hard work and the rewards will come over time. I'd like to thank our panel for joining us here today. I thank you for trusting in this session. I also wanted to thank the Master Series Studio and the film crew here, and Sharif and team for trusting in this topic to raise this platform for us. And thank you to all of you for listening. I encourage you to take this path forward and create the things that you wish existed. Thank you.